Our main presenter this morning is Jeff Reese, also known as the artist Solomon Kane. Jeff Reese worked for the Harris County Sheriff's Office for almost 26 years and was certified by the FBI as a hostage negotiator. He has handled suicidal and barricaded subjects and was a Crisis Hotline volunteer counselor for over 3 years. Jeff helped form the Sheriff's Office Mental Health Unit, was assigned to the Harris County Psychiatric Center, and earned several prestigious certifications and taught courses relating to his expertise in mental health. Today, he's going to take us on a philosophic, psychedelic journey through the Harris County criminal justice system. Let's welcome Mr. Jeff Reese.
Hi, I was informed you usually have an intelligent presentation. We're going to vie from that this morning, I'm afraid. I'm going to pass up this. This is just the credentials. We don't need it. 20 minutes, 30 minutes is very short to talk about criminal justice. I've been published on spiritual dynamics and crisis negotiations, which deals with religion and mental illness. And there is a tie, I'm afraid. This is kind of the conservative viewpoint of law enforcement and criminal justice. You know, their view is if you don't want to get in jail, you don't break the law. And unfortunately, it's not so simple sometimes. I've got to turn this around because I've got to look at the slides. Basically, this is to distract you. I'm used to teaching police officers, and the attention span's about 2 seconds, so I've got to throw stuff up there normally to keep everybody's attention. But anyway, there's a guy named Kiriakou that actually is the only CIA agent that has done prison time, and he did prison time for whistleblowing, if you will. He's the one that spoke out about the torture. So law enforcement, whether it's federal, state, or local, they have a way of dealing with the problems. And you're only going to hear that the problem was solved, but you won't hear how it was solved and who was actually punished. And that's kind of the official police outlook of criminal justice. There's not a lot of compassion in it, okay? And this is just me. This is an alias I had. People thought I dropped acid, so I had to come up with an alias for my artwork, and it's a tribute to Soren Kierkegaard, the father of existentialism. But I wanted something I could put SK on my paintings, and kind of kept the sheriff's department out of my business, so to speak. That's one of my cards. If you want one of my cards, they're in the back. I'm just throwing this up there to show you and I guess give you an example of things. It's kind of hard. It's kind of light. It's not real dark in here, and it's not conducive for slides, but basically it's, I guess, what I'm going to say. And I'm the current president of the Houston Peace and Justice Center. And a lot of times art and law enforcement don't really mix too much, but in my case they did. I went to art school. That was my background before I went into law enforcement. Not a real smart thing to do. We had a meeting with the chief of police with all the activists, and I was the only white guy in there, and it was the Nation of Islam and the New Black Panther Party. And I was finally with a group of people that could understand when I talked about criminal justice, what was really intended behind the scenes, and they could appreciate the humor in what I said. I thought I was going to change the system from the inside, but it doesn't work that way, and it's not quite so simple. And so for 20 minutes, I think, well, I've got to cut my slides down. Lewis invited me after I gave a presentation to the Houston Property Rights Association. It's kind of a little more conservative side. And so I was going to cut my presentation down, but in the process, I increased it by about 30 more slides. And the reason I did is I also belong to the Greater Houston Coalition for Justice, and there was a drug raid that occurred at 7815 Harding Street last month. And I don't know if y'all heard about it. It was on the news. And in the beginning, something was very, very wrong. So we did a press conference in front of City Hall. And we had all the news media was there, but they didn't say anything. And it's like, wow, we kind of wasted our time trying to present, what something's really wrong with this. And so there's a guy named Hi Boy. Hi and I decided we're going to do a town hall, and the coalition backed us on this. Johnny Mata, it's his group, really good group. So Hi and I went door to door, knocking on doors and talking to the neighbors about what happened, because the official version of what happened has changed many, many times. And at first it was very pro-police, we're going to back the blue. But then I got to thinking, wow, something's very wrong with this, and no one's paying attention until the information started leaking out. And eventually we found out the drug warrant itself was bad, that they had lied and said a confidential informant had claimed they had bought drugs at this residence. And then they found there was no confidential informant. And then they found the drugs were on the dash of the unit of the police car and never in the house to begin with. A lot of things are wrong about this whole situation, but the worst part is 2 people lost their lives. They shot their dog and then they shot them. And all for what? All for being at war, because you didn't know we were at war, did y'all? Anyway, I'm going to throw a few slides out here, because when I was trying to cut the slides out, I had to add all this last night, because this dawned on me. It's like, wait a minute, maybe this is why a lot of this happened is, we don't know what's going on. The public really doesn't know, and law enforcement kind of likes it like that, because they make a lot of money off this war. Okay, the war's really against us. How can you have a war on drugs? I know I'm supposed to be talking about criminal justice, but this is very important. This is where it relates to us. We had that town hall, a lot of emotions came out. A lot of people were very upset, and rightfully so. There are issues that we really aren't talking about that are related. And the Chinese said this. They said the problem is that we're all one family. The human race is one big family, but some of us don't treat the others as family members. And we have a group in law enforcement that we've allowed to get this huge power. And who checks the police? When they do wrong, when you complain, you go to internal affairs, right? And internal affairs does what? They investigate their own. But it's not quite so simple as that. There's more to it than meets the eye. There was a guy named Clonch that I had met being a mental health officer, and he was shot to death in his wheelchair. He had one arm. And he was shot to death for being a threat because he had a pin in his hand. And they thought they might get stabbed. But have you ever seen wheelchairs? You got to have 2 arms to operate it. Well, if you've only got one arm and your arm's holding something, how are you a threat? Well, what happened to the officer that did that? Nothing, basically. And we talked about the drug war. And right here we can see in Colorado, people want facts. Well, it's a lot cheaper to legalize cannabis. It creates jobs. It actually reduces crime instead of increasing crime. Didn't work then, it's not working now, basically. And even though this is not what I came to talk about, but it is part of the criminal justice system. This tells you right there how much money is being spent on this war. $1.5 trillion. And what's the purpose of the war? To eradicate drugs? No, we haven't eradicated anything. They're actually easier to access now than they ever have been. But we've benefited the cartels. And it began with Richard Nixon back in those days. And how long before you exit a war, right? We got out of Vietnam. We got out of Korea. We got out of Iraq. Haven't gotten out of Afghanistan yet. But they realized at a certain point, what point do you cut your losses and say, hey, we're spending all this money, we're not doing anything, And unfortunately, I read a lot, and a lot of the Chinese philosophers had it understood. This is a book called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Now, if you're in the military, my youngest son's a lieutenant in the U.S. Army, and that's required reading now, The Art of War, okay? But if you read what it says, it's always this cautionary aspect of war. You don't enter it very lightly. And I can read the slides, but it's better if you can read the slides here. In law enforcement, we teach somebody, we have slides, and we stand up and read off the slides. Also, I would prefer to get handed the material and let me read it. So a lot of this is again, it's a 20-minute presentation of criminal justice, and it's like saying, hey, I want you to come talk about algebra for 20 minutes at school. Well, how much are you going to comprehend about that subject? It's going to be very, very difficult. And it's not easy. And the thing is this, when you go to war, and arms are instruments of ill omen. The reason I joined the Houston Peace and Justice Center, my personal experience was you don't have to always pull your gun out. You don't always have to hit somebody to get the message. It's not necessary. A lot of people lost their lives needlessly. And I know there are kids in here, so I won't stay too long on the war slides. And some sad thing. This is the Eric Garner situation. I don't know if you all saw that, but Eric Garner was choked to death in New York. And at the end of it, when they got up off of him, they high-fived each other, not realizing they just killed a human being. And the guy that filmed it, what happened to him? This is the guy that filmed it. He's doing 4 years in prison. Sometimes it's not nice to cross law enforcement. They don't take it real good. You know, there's not a sense of humor in there, and sometimes there shouldn't be. When we talk about war, there's the results of the war, okay? And again, Dr. Martin Luther King, I made a big mistake at the town hall meeting that I was a moderator, and I read a quote from Dr. King. And I didn't realize, how hypocritical it might look for this white guy to be reading a quote in February from Dr. King, especially when the audience is full of activists. But I read it anyway, The truth is the truth. And it's all about perception sometimes, going to art. Y'all see what's behind me, right? You see what it is. Well, it depends on which way you look at it, you might see something else. So basically, it's all about perception and how we view things. This thing right here, if you look at it, is it moving? Well, it's not, but our mind, if your peripheral vision, once you focus on one wheel, the rest of them will start moving. You can't stop it. It's an optical illusion. Just like M.C. Escher, which end is up. A lot of times it's very difficult to understand. A lot of it's from our understanding. And this is when I talk to officers, the crisis intervention techniques, I'd start this way about abstract and concrete thinking. And this is an example of concrete and abstract thinking. There's a bowl and a saucer. Which holds more? The bowl or the saucer? Does anybody know? Well, we'll cut to the chase. The saucer is going to hold more, right? Especially if you're talking about soup, right? We talk liquids, gas, or whatever. So the bowl is going to hold more, but this would let you know whether you're a concrete or an abstract thinker. Why does the bowl hold more? What enables the bowl to hold more? Okay. Well, let me put it this way. This room right here, it's got 4 walls, a ceiling, and a floor. All right? If this room was full of concrete, it would be totally unusable to us, okay? The thing that allows the bowl to hold more is nothing, the space. The space is important. But when we think, well, why does the bowl hold more? We'll say it's the walls, it's the sides of the bowl. But it's actually the nothing, okay? So they're not going to tell the police officers that nothing was important. They could understand that. And then there's a lesson of the tree, right? There's this old tree and this master's walking with his disciple, and all the trees have been cut down in this field except this one old gnarly giant tree that's been there for hundreds of years. And the disciple goes, hey, how come all the trees have been cut down except this one tree? And he would say, well, that's because everyone understands the use of the useful, but no one understands the use of the useless. What do you mean? He says, well, the tree was no good. If you tried to cut it for firewood, it wouldn't burn right. And it was too crooked to use for coffins even. No one could use this tree, so they left it alone, and it grew to a ripe old age. And it's kind of what my philosophy is called the Miller Lite view of policing. Less is more. I think Cicero said that the more law is less justice. So anyway, now on to the original, what we really came here for was the criminal justice system. Okay? When people think of criminal justice, this is what you think of right here, right? A bunch of criminals need to be in jail. They need to be in prison, okay? But the reality is it's more like this, okay? A lot of the prisons and jails are filled with these kind of people. Yeah, there's a lot of bad people that need to be there, a lot of murderers and rapists and robbers that should be there. There's a good portion of them that basically are mentally ill, they're addicts, and which we need to realize, like right now, these are 2 people I actually know personally, but this is also important before we go any further. It doesn't matter who's telling it to you. You really have to judge the essence of what's being told, and this is where law enforcement, you see a uniform and a badge, and you're automatically going to assume what they're telling you the truth, right? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. A question came up. See, police officers, we're taught this way. It's just something that's inherent in the job. And when people, they look to the police for answers, So they're taught, you got to have an answer. It might be the wrong answer, but you're going to get an answer, right? And it's going to be spoken authoritatively, so you're going to say, okay. The guy that taught me traffic back in the day when the Astrodome was still up, that's what he said. His concept was a moving car was a happy car. So what do you mean? He says, well, if I hold somebody up for 5 minutes, they're going to start honking their horn. But if I tell them to go in circles, they'll keep driving around and be perfectly happy. And sometimes that's the way it works. But now talking about the jail system, 60% on average are there and they haven't gone to trial yet. And they go they stay in there for quite a while, and the system works that way. Back in the day, the bail system, if you were poor, you couldn't get out. Now, if you have money, you can get out, and then that's kind of the way the system's very, very unfair. So we're trying to change that, but it's very difficult to change law enforcement. Everybody loves the police, right? I mean, that's just the way it is. And this is not anti-police, because I was one for almost 26 years. But we got to realize, I think, going back to that war on drugs, why are we spending all this money? Why do we keep people in jail? 60% of the population, we're talking 10,000 to 11,000 people on a monthly basis that could be home being fed by their family, using their own electricity. Instead, we have them in jail. Why do we have private prisons that we pay to house our own citizens? It's just something to think about, okay? But sometimes you got to say something. Unfortunately, we got this, right? Advertising versus reality. It never looks the same. What we're told and what we're shown is not always what we get. This is what you see. The media loves stuff like this. They like the terrible, horrible things because it makes good ratings. And it's all about the ratings. But it might not be about the reality. And all these are real pictures. I'm not saying they're not. Okay, you're going to see that, but I had a whole different experience in my 26 years there. It wasn't always that way, Yes, they're horrible people, but they're not always horrible people. And I could probably tell you things that, you would find quite amusing. But when you see the media, this is what you're going to see, right? These are identified as what? Gang members. Horrible crimes are being committed. But there's a disparity in the information we're being given, and we need to look through it a lot of times. And you see how one guy he's labeled a thug for kicking an officer, and another kid murdered another kid, and he's a teen, right? I don't know. There's a reason for things, and we need to understand. The Black Lives Matter, they have a valid point. And a lot of times we don't see that. We're not in the Black Lives Matter movement. We don't know. But yeah, there is a disparity. And if we look at things honestly and honest with ourselves, we need to realize the system might need to be changed. And this is very important about being quiet when things that matter. When your voices, when you lose the ability to speak up, then in America we can speak up. Other countries, not so much. I guess a lot of times you see the protests, but what's behind the protest? Why are these people, why would you protest? And when you see slides like this, what do you see? What is that slide of? A bunch of thugs and gangsters? Well, actually, it's for rap music. And yes, they have guns, but those are just young men that are trying to find who they are. We talked about bad people. And a lot of times people gyrate to the bad, but that's because they're young, they're trying to find themselves. This is like James Cagney. Think about it, it's always been this way. Thug life. Everyone wants to be bad because you're trying to find yourself. Does that deserve a life in prison because you make a bad choice? Yeah, people make bad choices. So what do we do with them? We warehouse them. How much money do we make over putting somebody in prison? Shouldn't make anything. It costs money. It costs a lot more. Costs a lot more to rehabilitate somebody. This is what it looks like. I don't know if you ever bothered to look. This is a 1200 Baker Street jail. And it's not fun. It's jail. You really wouldn't want to put your dog there, basically, from my perspective. And this is a brand new building. But it's not nice. And why? Here are some statistics about the amount of people in jail and who's in jail. I've got about 5 more minutes. I'm going fast, We're going to go back to the drug raid at 7815 Harding Street. This is Dennis Tuttle and Regina, I think Nichols. They were killed in a botched drug raid. up in the corners, Randall Callanan's a friend of mine. He's a civil rights attorney. I had to hire him to protect myself when I was a police officer. There's a lot of things you don't know, and people don't like it when you speak up. You know, it's not a good thing. Trust me. I can tell you by first-hand experience. So what would happen? A guy named High Boy and I, when we did this town hall, we went around, passed flyers out. In fact, I nailed them up on the house next to the bullet holes. By the way, they're all exit markings for the bullets. None of them were going inside. They're all coming out of the house. This is a young lady that was killed herself in the same thing, in a drug raid. I mean, do y'all know anything about no-knock warrants and why they exist? Well, they exist so you can burst into the house before they destroy the evidence, and then you can catch them before it's flushed down a toilet, right? Well, we're flushing lives down the toilet when we do these raids. How much is a human life worth versus some drugs and some narcotics? And basically, a dynamic entry, which is what that's called, is not a good thing. And the National Tactical Officers Association said you should only be used for violent fugitives. And that's when you should do it. But across America, 83 people have died, and I forgot how many police officers have been killed. But the good thing, after we did this town hall, which was pretty controversial, they've ended the practice of no-knock warrants. So something good came out of it. And if you did see the town hall, it was like a riot. It was basically a controlled chaos. And Chief Acevedo and Kim Ogg, they kind of took the brunt of it. See, people want to blame. They blame these two people for what's going on, but the reality is it's been going on for years. Everybody remember Joe Campos Torres? He was born and died before y'all were even born, guys. I mean, this is back in the 70s, I think 77, and he was beaten to death. And ironically, it's not too far away from where we had this town hall on Jensen. They called it the Hole. And when HPD would get somebody that was very combative, they would tune them up, as they call. And they would take them there and they would rough them up before they put them into jail. It's called an attitude adjustment, But they went too far and they killed him, and then they just threw him in the bio, even with the handcuffs on. So it's called if you research the Moody Park riots, that's why that happened. And you'd think that was 1977, we would have learned something. Here we are in 2019. The funny thing is, in 2019, here we have people concocting search warrants and planning drugs. Why? It's kind of difficult. These were two sisters that came up and talked to me. In fact, the news people interviewed them later on. Their father was killed in one of these drug raids. And actually, I think it was my ex-department that did it, but they were looking through the bedroom window and shot him when he raised up when somebody burst in his house and he grabbed his gun. So it's not a good thing. Trust me. So it's a good thing that they're doing away with the warrants, and they've agreed to wear body cameras. So that's another result. We actually accomplished a lot for the little minimum of effort. So that's a good thing. And then part of the town hall, they wanted the FBI to investigate, and Chief Acevedo said, "No, we can do it on our own." Well, there's been so much noise and made about it that the FBI has now agreed to investigate the entire narcotics division. So. I'm going to end it here. Part of HPJC, we support other groups. We're a 501(c), and we hold money for Food Not Bombs. We hold money for en masse incarceration. So basically, that's where I'm at right now with HPJC. But I'm just kind of a presentation here. We're going to open it up to questions because I'm going to stop right now. Okay. Well, yes, sir. You got a mic? That's even better.
Here we go. Question from Victor.
Yeah, I enjoyed your presentation very much, but I wanted to know, have things gotten better under Kim Ogg as the DA of Harris County?
That's a good question. We want to focus our blame on people, on Kim Ogg. She's better than, I think, her predecessor. Charges have been tried to file on me for speaking out under other predecessors. Kim Ogg, it's really not about Kim Ogg or Chief Acevedo. The system has been in place for hundreds of years. As long as we've had police departments, we've had police corruption. And they've been here 2 years, basically, on the job. And it was a little unfair. I let them take the hit for it. And so when I speak out now, I've got to kind of defend them because I didn't defend them that night. But I will defend them now. It's beyond them, you know. And you really got to look at her. She took a lot of flack from the activist community for asking for 90 more prosecutors. And the issue was, do we need more prosecutors or do we need more diversion from the jail system? And so she took a lot. So I can't really answer that question, but time will tell. Well, yes, with tons of questions. Go ahead.
I wanted to comment and ask a question on what you think about this. When I was growing up, there wasn't police officers in schools. Now there's a police officer in kindergarten. There's a police officer in elementary school. There's a police officer in high schools. When I was growing up, there wasn't a police officer at the movie theaters where young people gathered. There wasn't police officers at every park and every organization. But now it seems like everywhere you go, there's a large amount of people. You have a police officer there with you. What do you think the desensitization of all of us being exposed to police officers starting at an early age all the way to adulthood has done to America, and do you think that it's a direction we should head?
Well, that's a good point. And again, that's kind of symptomatic of the problem. And I went on Connect the Dots with Dr. Muhammad on the radio show, and Chief Acevedo had said he's 500 officers short. And Dr. Muhammad, he took up, he says, and we put a lot on the police officers. You know, they have to be social workers, they have to be all these things. And I know we need more, and I don't know. I think maybe it's not a question we need more police officers. We need to act better. We need to have a society where we don't need that many police officers. But that's my opinion. And what you say is true because we segment it. You know, the Chinese said we need to step back and look at the problem overall. We've segmented this problem, but the police are part of us. The police officers just put a uniform on. They're just like you or I, just like it was I, but they're part of the society, and we've separated them, and maybe we should try to include them more. As far as a violent society that we have, yeah, the sad thing is it might be more violent, but how do we solve it? But, you know, so your question is kind of like, I don't know, it could go either way. I don't know if I answered your question either. So anyway, let's move on because I don't know
we're gonna go
if I have the answers, but we'll try.
Mike, Bob, and Sasha in that order.
To what extent are we using, and to what extent will we increasingly use technology to avoid so much incarceration?
Well, that's a good question. I don't think we're using it, you know, and technology is one thing, but humanity is something else. And I think we got to go back to the human element. You know, if your brother or your sister's in prison, it's a lot different than someone you don't know. And all the technology, they have ankle monitors for, you know, their jail diversion projects. And that's good, but, you know, I think, you know, it's a complex problem. And I don't know that it can help, but for me, the main issue is a human element, not the technological element.
Are there any places in the country which are actually making a serious effort at correction rather than punishment? You know, screening convicts for psychological issues, rehabilitation, social reconditioning, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, there is more. Honestly, it's a lot better than when I started. I'll be honest with you. There were a lot of people that, you know, lost their life that shouldn't have lost their life, and now they have more programs for diversion. But is it enough? I don't know. I can't answer that. You know, nationally speaking, I know locally we have increased diversion projects, but there's a lot more work that can be done.
Hi. It says there that you certified as a hostage negotiator.
Right.
Could you tell us a little bit about that experience, if you had experience with it? Thank you.
Well, the FBI trains their hostage negotiators at Crisis Hotline, and if you ever thought about doing it, it's a great program. When I took it, it was many, many years ago. It was 53 hours and I think 80 hours of on-the-job training, and you talked a lot. It's a lot of suicide intervention. We weren't used very much. See, law enforcement doesn't need any negotiators. They'd rather go in there and shoot somebody. It's sad enough, but that's a fact. The first warrant I was on, I was out on the street. They're training me, and they're yelling at me to hurry up and get this. It's called a 2B warrant. So hurry up and get this warrant. In the meantime, the man had taken his, I guess, girlfriend and stepdaughter hostage. He had a shotgun and a handgun, and he had gone ahead and let them go. So the immediacy was gone now. Why would you want to rush in and kick the door in and shoot this guy? But they would, at that time, rather do that and face the media and anything else. It was okay to kill this person. And that was the outlook of my coworkers. And it's not the outlook that I shared. So the hostage negotiation, it didn't last too long. I did talk a guy down. Margaret Downing did it. If you ever read the Houston Press, this guy named Robert. His name was Robert Trumpfeller. He was on top of Soleros throwing bricks down on cars. But we were eventually disbanded, and then they recreated the real team about, I don't know, 10 years ago. But it's very political, and when you step on toes, you don't get to, you're the reindeer that doesn't get to play in the reindeer game, so they find someone else to do that. So even though I did it for a while, I didn't head up the official team when it was eventually created, with the SWAT team. We had an emergency response team. Yes? Does that answer your question? Okay.
Yes, I wanted to know, how do most police officers feel about gun control and the fact that basically you never know who's carrying, what their state of mind is? I would think that police officers would be the first ones in favor of better gun laws.
Chief Acevedo has come out for gun control laws, and I think maybe it's the wrong word. We drive cars and we have laws. We have to obey these traffic laws. Well, with gun control, why don't we, maybe if we phrase it different, it would be more acceptable to people, but people automatically panic when they hear that word gun control. Now, it's easy for me. I can carry a gun anywhere I go, even retired now. But it's not fair if I feel safe and you can't. So there's a duality, there's a problem. In all criminals, gun control is for the civilians that obey the law. A criminal's not going to obey the law, that's why they're a criminal. They're going to find a gun. The answer, though, is not more guns. That's why I joined the Houston Peace and Justice Center, okay? The answer is more peace, not the guns. That's an instrument of ill omen, and you should stay away from it. It's not necessary, So that's a trick question for me, for a lot of law enforcement, a lot of the unions. They go either way on that, because that's more of a conservative view, is they're against gun control. It's more a liberal view to be for gun control. Me, I'm for people control, and I don't think we really need all the guns.
Isn't that partly why police officers use deadly force so often?
No, I'm sorry,
because the other person can be armed.
Yes, but think about it. I have a responsibility. I have a gun. When I was a police officer, all right, I didn't pull that gun out unless I was going to shoot somebody, okay? But unfortunately, a lot of times the mentality of police is like, you need to go home at the end of your shift, okay? And so you're in a situation that's highly volatile. You could or could not have a gun, and this is where you have a lot of these shootings. But it's kind of the presumption of innocence. Police work is really about 80% of writing reports. When you call 911, in a burglary or robbery in progress, it's not always that way. A lot of times your car was broken into, so you're going to call the police, and they go and take a report. A lot of times you're dealing with conflicts, domestic disputes. So there's always, even with guns, let's say if we didn't have any guns, you'd still want to treat, a police officer would still treat that the same way as if you did have a gun. So I can't talk for anybody else. I'm only speaking for myself. You got to understand. Everyone's going to have a different opinion, and I understand. I think it's about time. I think everybody's for some kind of restrictions and regulations on about how you have guns. We have more guns than anywhere in the world. It hasn't changed anything. It's not going to. But that, again, part of that's education, and for me. And we don't need any more guns. We have plenty of them. Go ahead.
We've got 2 more questions lined up, and then we'll have to wrap it up.
I was listening to something last night that was saying that Texas has the highest rate of executions under the death penalty.
Yes, they do.
Why is that true then?
Well, that's because we are a law and order city and a state, right? Remember Clint Eastwood, Hang 'em High? That wasn't just a movie. That's a philosophy. No politician ever gets elected in Texas by being soft on crime. Okay, it's just not yet. I mean, things are changing. The demographics are changing. And a lot of it, again, it goes back to education and understanding. And that's why I agree. Anywhere I go, I'll go to talk and I'll try to explain things. But a lot of times it's our understanding and our perception that makes it this way.
Yeah. Two comments. 20 years as a criminal defense lawyer and 10 years as a judge, I have met hundreds of law enforcement officers, federal agents, local police. I never met anyone that pursued law enforcement for any reason other than to help his community and help humanity as he or she perceived it at the time he entered law enforcement. And second comment, I saw your graph where the number of people incarcerated increased in about 72 when Nixon declared the war on drugs. But that was also the time when the mandatory draft was abolished. And I think that had more to do with the rise in crime than the war on drugs.
Okay. The first part, you got to realize everyone's an individual. I'm just one person. Every instance is his own instance. And I don't want to paint everybody, maybe I'm getting the wrong impression. I don't know. But no, law enforcement officers, they're not bad people. Okay, they have a great responsibility, and so I'm not saying anything different than that. But what I'm giving you is my story, my presentation. And so, I don't know what to tell you about the other section. Maybe yes, maybe no. It's all a guess. Nobody really knows for sure.
Oasis?
Go ahead.
Let's welcome let's thank Mr. Jeff Reese, I should say, for staying around and answering our questions today. Thank you so much, Jeff. And Jeff...